You're listening to the Big Ideas Podcast with Ashlee Ilg. Tune in for honest conversations as we pursue bold dreams, redefine what is possible, and empower the next generation to live big. You'll hear stories that prove over and over again that just because something wasn't a part of our plan doesn't mean it won't be used for our good. Whether you're already an entrepreneur, you dream of becoming one, or you're raising the next generation of entrepreneurs, this podcast is for you. There's no time to waste on your big ideas. So let's get started. Here's your host, Ashlee Ilg.
Hi friends, welcome back to the Big Ideas Podcast. I'm Ashlee Ilg, and I'm so excited to keep this ball rolling as we are going through the Future CEO Playbook, or you're using your own notebook and just using this podcast series as just a fun way to start your business from ground up. So far, we have gone through what is your big idea. We've gone through some really important CEO mindsets and habits. Last episode was all about building your brand and your logo, the whole voice and personality of your business. And today's episode is going to be super important. We're talking all about profit. It's called Show Me the Money, because if your business is not creating a profit, if you're not making money, then it might just be an expensive hobby. And so we want to make sure that that's not the case for you. We want to make sure that your business is profitable. We want to really break down what is the cost of your business, what are the expenses, how can we set some goals, how can we make sure that we're really building a solid profit margin that is just setting us up for long-term success. And so this episode, again, is going through more of what the CEO Playbook is. If you do not have the playbook, I'd highly recommend ordering it. It's at ashleeilg.com/playbook. The link is, of course, in the show notes as well. But let's keep it moving, just for making sure we're all on the same page. Let's just go through what the price is going to be set around, right? We need to understand how to make that price the right price, right? And so the cost, of course, that's how much it really costs to make your product or provide your service, right? The value is how helpful, interesting, or unique it is to your customer, like their perceived value, and the actual value of your business or your product. The profit, of course, is how much extra money there is on top of your expenses. So for an example, if it costs you $2 to make your product and you sold it for $5, as a simple example, your profit would be the difference, $3. So in this episode, we are going to break down knowing your costs, setting a smart price, keeping track of what's going in, what's coming in, and what's going out. And then, of course, setting goals, saving, and reinvesting the money that we're earning, right? We want to build a long-term successful business, and these points are going to be huge for us. And so let's start with the price. We want to set a price that's right. And again, the price is really based on three things, right? The price of your product or your service is going to be based on the cost of what it costs you to make or provide this service. The value is going to be the other thing, right? Value is what the customer finds is most helpful, interesting, unique, the perceived value of what your product or your service is, and your profit. How much money is there in between what your cost is and what you sell it for, right? That's your profit margin. And we want to make sure that you've got a nice, healthy profit margin so that it makes sense for you. It makes sense for your time. Time is definitely something that entrepreneurs have to take into consideration when they're setting their price. The value of your time is huge. Hey friend, quick pause before we keep going. As you know, this season of the Big Ideas podcast is all about building ideas, confidence, leadership, and real-world skills our kids can actually use. And if you've been listening thinking, wow, I wish I had something like this when I was growing up, I did too, which is why I created the Future CEO Playbook. It's a hands-on guide designed to help kids think like problem solvers, build and test ideas, understand money, communicate clearly, and take initiative with faith, purpose, and creativity at the center. You can order the spiral-bound workbook at ashleeilg.com or the paperback version on Amazon. Both are designed to be worked through interactively, so kids can write, plan, build, and reflect as they go. If this season has you inspired, the playbook helps you put it into action. All right, let's get back to the show. So let's talk about understanding your expenses, right? Because running any business business is going to have costs associated with it, right? And we want to be smart about what you spend. So think about this. And again, you can keep track of this as you're writing through the playbook or in your own notebook. But some costs that might be associated with your business would be the supplies, the ingredients, things that you actually have to buy to use to make your product. Maybe you need to invest in some equipment or some tools, depending on what your product and your business is. Don't forget about packaging or shipping. If you are doing all in-house distribution, at least to begin with, you are going to need to consider packaging and the cost of shipping. What about booth fees? If you're going to help spread the word and have some marketing efforts and want to be a part of marketing in person at events like that, pop-up events, things like that, take into consideration the rental costs for those. And then, of course, marketing materials as well, like flyers, ads, even Facebook ads or social media things. All of those cost money. An online presence, there's a lot you can do for free, but some opportunities, if you want to take advantage of, they do cost a little bit. So make a list of what those expenses might be, and then let's do another fun exercise here as we break down what your costs are going to be. And I'm going to use two different examples just for like tangible examples for you to follow through with me. I know I've used a couple different examples as we've gone, so I'm trying to give just kind of a wide variety of ideas and examples, again, of product-based businesses, service-based businesses. So we're going to do a bead bracelet business example for here, and then also like a lawn care service. So of course, if you're doing the jewelry or the bracelet business, your beads, they're gonna cost you something, right? And depending on what kind of beads you use and where you get them from, let's say that your beads cost you like $5 per bracelet to make, right? And so let's just go ahead and make like a full sheet on your notebook, and graph it out with like what the item or the material is, and then have a column for how much you need, like the quantity. Make another column for the cost per unit, and then another final column of the total cost, right? And so for this example's sake, let's say the beads, I need 50 of them to make one bracelet. The cost per unit is 10 cents a bead. I figure out the math, I figure out where I'm going to get them from, I break it down to the cost per bead is 10 cents. And so again, I'm just doing easy math here because that's how my brain works. But 50 beads at 10 cents each, that means that my cost per bracelet is $5. So I need to make sure I'm going to be able to sell it for more than $5 to make sure I'm making a profit, right? We're not making nonprofits here. This is not the business plan for creating a nonprofit. Those have value, but that's not what we're here talking about. So now let's say the lawn care business, completely different. You don't have to buy a lawnmower, for an example, every time you mow a lawn, just like you need to buy beads for every bracelet you make. So it's a little different. So depending on what your business idea is, take some time to really think about, a service or something where you need to have a pretty significant upfront investment in your equipment, like a lawn care business. You need to make sure that you've got a lawnmower, maybe a weed eater, maybe some other tools, a leaf blower, things like that, to make sure that you can do a job well done and have repeatable customers, right? Maybe your parents have equipment that you can borrow, or a friend has equipment you can borrow, or you've got some sort of access to whatever this business plan is of yours, which is why it makes sense for you to do this, right? So everybody's scenario is a little bit different. This is simply just an example, but let's say I needed to buy a lawnmower, a leaf blower, and an edger, right? I don't know what all the lawn equipment is called. Clearly, I don't do my landscaping. I probably should know that, but let's just, for easy math, let's say it cost me $1,000 to invest in all the equipment I need, but now all it's going to cost me moving forward is my time, right? Maybe some gasoline and some fuel for my equipment. But other than that, and maybe, fuel for my truck to get to and from people's homes. So your chart is going to look a little bit different, right? So the item or the material, it's going to be a really large number, large price for what that initial investment is going to be. But then you'll have to, narrow it down and figure out how many lawns you need to cut to recoup that initial investment. And then beyond that is almost straight profit. So it's a different type of profit analysis that you'll need to do for something with a a bigger upfront investment versus something like a jewelry business or even a baking company or something where you're buying products as you go to fulfill orders and to create something that people are ordering and buying, right? And then there's another business author out there too, where it's more of like a residual passive income, where you create something one time, like an ebook or some sort of online resource, something that people can buy and download, and you only had to build it and create it once, and it's repeatable, right? And it lives online, so there's not overhead. You don't have to, print it every single time. Maybe there's several print on demand services out there. My son just started a t-shirt company, a shirt company. He does t-shirts and hoodies and things like that, sweatshirts. And, he didn't want to have to pay for the overhead of inventory and stocking all the colors and all the sizes and all of the designs that he had come up with. And so he found a resource that does printing on demand. So when somebody orders a shirt online, it's printed specifically for them and then it's shipped directly to them. And so there are options like that to keep overhead down. So again, just depending on what your business idea is, just help to fill in this sort of initial chart to know what it's going to cost you per item, and then for a total cost per product, what that's going to look like for you. And then this is where it gets fun. This is where you get to decide how much profit do you want to make, how much profit can realistically make sense for somebody to spend on your product or your service, right? And so I like to call this the pricing comparison chart. If you're using the playbook, you'll see that in this section as well. But it kind of shows a couple different ways that if you wanted to, again, we'll use the bead bracelet example for simplicity's sake. But let's say, that bracelet costs $5 to make, like we said, and we wanted to make $100 as quickly as possible, right? And so we were selling those bracelets for $10 each, which means we're making $5 every bracelet we sell. That's the difference between the cost and the expense, the price and the expenses. So our profit margin is $5 every bracelet. So how many bracelets do we need to sell to make $100? Well, we need to sell 20 bracelets, and that will reach that goal. And maybe that will help recoup maybe that initial investment that we spent on beads, right? Well, what if we wanted to sell the bracelets for a higher price? Well, we have a couple questions to ask. Number one, will our customer pay that? Do the bracelets justify a higher price? Are we using a higher quality bead or a different stringing technique or a more unique or personalized style and design that we can sell them for more than the $10? Maybe they're more of a boutique-y style, an elevated, more luxurious bracelet style, and maybe we can get away with selling them for more like $15 or even $20 a bracelet, right? And so all of a sudden our profit margin doubles, right? Let's say we do sell them for $15, just because I need to do easy math. And so now our profit per bracelet is $10, right? Because it still only cost us $5. That didn't change, but now we're going to sell it for a higher price because we believe we can, and customer behavior shows that, right? We do sell them. And so now to reach our $100 goal, we only need to sell 10 bracelets, right? And so these are just some questions you need to work through. Again, if you're using the playbook, there's plenty of space and areas to chart this and work it out and really compare different pricing strategies, different costs, maybe really help figure out the best source of finding these supplies that you need. Like I said in the example with needing some larger equipment, maybe some more expensive investments up front, you can find some used equipment or different resources to keep your initial costs down in that example as well, right? Now, I'm also a big fan of tracking what you're doing. The best way to learn from past experiences, or maybe we would even call them mistakes or ways that we want to improve down the road, which again is going to be in a future module, is keeping track of what we're doing now. Again, if you're using the playbook, there's an entire page dedicated to tracking those initial sales. And I would definitely recommend doing that. So you're going to want to mark, how much are you earning? What are you spending? And what is your profit for everything that's moving, right? So from the beginning, make sure you have an area for tracking all of that. I'm also a huge fan of setting goals. So setting financial goals from the start, knowing what you'd like your business to provide, what you would like your business to create, and what you're aspiring and working towards is just huge, right? It's so rewarding because it's fun to get excited, like, yay, I made $100, but you're like, well, I don't know, was that my goal? I'm not sure. What if my goal was 200? Then I've still got, a little more work to do. What if my goal was $1,000? What if my goal was to pay off my car with this business idea within 30 days, So whatever that goal looks like, it doesn't necessarily have to be just a dollar amount. It It could even be linked to an experience. When I sell 100 of these, or I, book 100 of these appointments or make a certain amount of money, then I'm going to reward myself with this. I'm going to have this paid off, which means I have more flexibility to go do this, right? Have fun with it. Goals are meant to be rewarding and encouraging. They're meant to be that fuel that you need on days that you don't want to show up and you don't want to do the work. Going back to that CEO mindset and habit piece of it, right? Goals are a huge part of that. You're going to want an excuse to celebrate and just see your hard work coming to pass, right? So set those money goals, know how much you're going to need to hit those goals, and make it meaningful. Make sure it's going to be something that you're going to be so excited when you hit that, right? Okay, so some final considerations as we're working through this section of setting your price, figuring out your profit, all the things. Some final considerations. Number one, I'm calling this what's it worth? Take the what's it worth test, right? Pretend like you're the customer. Would they, and we kind of talked about this already a little bit, but I really want to have a dedicated spot in your notes, part in your playbook here, specifically on, thinking like your customer. Really think critically about the value of your product or your service, and from the customer's perspective. Ask yourself, would you buy this product? Would you, like, for this price? Would you pay this price? Why or why not? Is it priced too high? Is it just unrealistic and it's just not worth the price you set? Or even, it could be even detrimental if it's priced too low. If it's almost suspicious or a little concerning that why is it so cheap? Is that a reflection of the quality? Is that a reflection of the kind of service I'm going to get? Being priced too low can be just as detrimental as being priced too high, right? You also need to ask, are there other similar products or services like this already already out there, and how can I compare with them? How can I be kind of in that same ballpark? And what can you do to make your business worth that price? What are some differentiating factors, some upgrades or some features or some added value, at least added perceived value of what your business, your service, your product, can you be thinking about now, right? And then finally, the other test I call it is, what's my strategy, right? As the business owner, you have the complete control and the whole decision to make of what's most important to you with your pricing, right? So like, what motivates you with selling your product? Help that determine what your pricing strategy is. So, is your goal to make it the most affordable thing out there? And maybe you have a real reason for wanting to do that. Maybe you feel like the problem that you're solving is that this, X product or service that you're now going to launch, it's just too expensive everywhere. And there's a better, more cost-efficient way of doing it. And that's your lane, so making it more affordable is what's super important to you. You get to decide that. Maybe you want to maximize your profit because you want to have more of like a boutique style business. You want to have a more elevated experience for each of your customers. And so your goal is not to sell 1,000 of your things. You'd rather sell 20 of your things and have this whole customer experience and customer service approach to your business, and maximizing your profit versus selling a gajillion of them is more of your focus, right? You get to decide. What about you just wanted to stand out from the competition? Everything is so neutral and white and gray, and you want to add just a pop of color or just completely different than what anybody expects in your industry, in your lane, in your category, right? You get to decide. What if you just want to cover the cost and you just want to test your idea? This is strictly just for research and you want to know what works. And so for right now, you just want to cover your costs. You're not really looking to go above or beyond with your profit right now. You just really need to know, is this true? And then you're going to just go from there, right? And that's what your stepping stone is right now. And that's what's most important to you. Again, you're the business owner. You get to decide, right? And maybe your profits and your pricing strategy is literally to help reach a goal. And once you reach that goal, you're good. You want to pay off your home. You want to pay off your car. You want to help your parents pay for something, or you want to take a trip somewhere that's really meaningful to you. And once you do that, your business has served its purpose and you're good to go, right? There's no wrong reason of starting a business, launching a product, learning all the things that come along the way, right? So you get to decide all of those things. So take a minute, think about what's most important to you with your pricing strategy, and keep that in mind as we keep moving forward, right? So to wrap up this whole segment, this section on show me the money, let's dive in on cost, expenses, setting a profit. Here's what I'd like for you to do before you come back to the next episode. I want you to set your official price, right? I want you to come up with a really clean, clear-cut list of what are you going to charge for your product or your service, like per product and per service. What is it going to cost you per product or per service, right? Just a really clean number, a final number. And maybe you have two variations if you've got, like a main product and then maybe like a subcategory of a product. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, but I know that there's things out there where, if you're going to sell this, then if you're going to sell bracelets, well, you might have matching necklaces, things like that. So try to keep it as clean as possible. We just want to know what you're going to sell your product for or your service, what it's going to cost you, and how much profit you're going to make from each one. So don't come back to the next episode until you have finalized that part, because we just needed to keep building here. But this has been super fun, figuring out the numbers, figuring out the profit, knowing that it's going to make sense on paper. It's not just going to be an expensive hobby, and it's going to help you reach those goals that are super important to you. That's what matters. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we're building this together, and come back soon. We've got more to go with building your business and taking those big ideas all the way. So we'll see you soon. Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in today. Before you go, it would mean the world to me and my family if you would share this episode with at least one person who you think might benefit from this message. And of course, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also follow me at Ashlee Ilg on Instagram to keep up with our adventures and for continued encouragement as you pursue your big ideas. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time.